Welcome, everybody. When you buy a house, you're looking for three things. You're looking for location, location, location. The same when you're doing an investment. Location, location, location. You cannot move where the fish are in the ocean. You cannot change where the raw materials or energy resources are in the world. And that's where the Arctic comes into this picture. Perfect location, top of the world, maybe top of mind for some people, and there's enormous economic opportunities in the Arctic region. Today, we'll be speaking about some of these economic opportunities. We'll be speaking about what the Arctic can do for Asia and what Asia can do for the Arctic, so we get a win-win situation. Before we start this panel, we are very honored that we have a short video greetings from the Alaskan Senator Dan Sullivan, who unfortunately could not come here, but he has sent us a greeting to kind of set the scene for what we'll be discussing. So please put on the video, and then after that we will start the panel. Thank you.
Greetings from Washington, D.C. I'm U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan from Alaska, and I am honored to be able to say a few words at the Arctic Circle Japan Forum, especially to highlight the great, strong relationship between Japan and Alaska. Now, I know there are many prominent dignitaries with all of you today. I'd like to recognize Japan's Arctic Ambassador Tanaka, and also Anchorage-based Consul General Inyahi, as well as the Sakawa Peace Foundation and the Wilson Center Polar Institute, as well as many, many others. Also in attendance is my good friend, former Lieutenant Governor and businessman Mead Treadwell. And Mead, as I know many of you know, has had a long, very productive relationship with Japan and our wonderful friends there. You know, since the brutal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, global energy markets have been turned on their heads. And one of the things that the United States and our allies in Asia and our allies in Europe have been trying to do very hard is to get off Russian oil and gas, to no longer depend on the gas from the brutal dictatorship run by Vladimir Putin. In this regard, we have strong and growing opportunities for Alaska and the rest of the United States to import more abundant, clean-burning Alaska natural gas. Now, I think all of you know Alaska was the first place in the world to export LNG from the United States, really from anywhere, to Japan. We have had an incredibly important and strong trading relationship for decades. And historic things have happened in Alaska. On January 7th, 1971, Emperor Hirohito, on his way to Europe, was greeted by President Nixon at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage. It was the first reigning monarch of Japan to step on foreign soil. We actually have a front page article, if you can see there, from the Japan Times commemorating this Emperor Nixon meeting in the great state of Alaska. Here's what Nixon said when he met the emperor in Alaska. Your journey symbolizes Japan's growing position in world affairs. Remember, this was in 1971. He continued, we meet in Anchorage, Alaska, a place which is approximately the same distance between Tokyo and Washington, D.C. And this fact reminds us that for the past quarter century, we have built a structure of political, economic, and cultural ties which spans the space between our two countries. In many ways, Alaska is that space between our two countries. In my own personal life, I've been honored to call many in Japan my good friends and colleagues, spending substantial time in Japan as a U.S. Marine, as a State Department and White House official in the Bush administration, and just as a U.S. Senator several times and just twice in the last year. So we will continue to build a structure of political, economic, and cultural ties which spans the space between our two countries, as President Nixon said, and Alaska will continue to play that key role. For example, we were the first state in the Union to have a trade office located in Japan. And we have the opportunity today to make those ties even stronger with our abundant supply of natural resources, natural gas, oil, critical minerals. We can all work together to have a stronger economy in Japan, in Alaska, in America. We also, of course, have that abundant supply of clean burning Alaska natural gas. In October, I joined Ambassador Rahm Emanuel for a summit focusing on the LNG project, the 800-mile pipeline that has a great opportunity to bring Alaska gas to Tidewater and tankers to export to Japan. That was a very successful summit. We've had positive responses since then, and there are all kinds of energy and trade opportunities beyond the LNG project that we should be taking advantage of. We are very confident that the strong and historic relationship between Japan and Alaska, and of course America, will continue during these challenging times. I hope you have a great summit and forum. We look forward to hearing the results when you're finished.
Thank you very much to the Senator. This morning, Chairman Crimson uploaded a very interesting photo on Twitter of a map of the Arctic region. And it shows it from a new perspective. And this is what we'll be discussing in this panel. We would actually look at the Arctic from here in Japan and to the neighbors in Alaska, for example, and also over to Iceland. So I would like to invite the three panelists on stage. So if the three panelists, please, could come on stage. And while they're getting on stage here for their opening remarks, all three, please, then I will just put it into context. On the Asian continent, there's 4.5 billion people living on the Asian continent. In the Arctic region, we are 4 million people. Again, you can see the size of Japan is 378 square kilometers. The size of Greenland is 2,166 square kilometers. So there's a lot of space in the Arctic region for very few people. And in Asia, we got a lot of people and a lot of resources, a lot of technology and skills. And also there's a need for some of the resources in the Arctic region. So these are some of the things we will be discussing now. What we will do is we will have opening remarks from the three speakers, and then we will have some questions and answers, and if we have time, hopefully also a question from the room. The first speaker is from Hokkaido University, the Arctic Research Center. He's the vice director and the professor, and he's very experienced and knowledgeable about both the Arctic region and the relationship with Japan. So, Otsuka, I would like to give you your opening remarks. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Matt. I am Natsuhiko Otsuka from Hokkaido University. And let me briefly to start the discussion. So Japan has been interested in the Northern Shield since 1990s. And the starting point was the research project done by Ship and Ocean Foundation of Japan and Fridtjof Nansen Institute of Norway and SNIF in Russia, namely INSLAB project. And since 2012, Japanese shipping sector carried out 70 trans-Arctic, trans-Northern Shield voyages between European ports. Among them, the container trial shipping was also carried out between Helsinki and Tomakoma in Hokkaido in 2019. But since Ukraine crisis, the international trans-Northern Shield shipping cargo transport is stopped. On the other hand, the trans-Northwest Passage activity is restarted after the pandemic by the cruise activities and the expedition voyage. And now, the new challenge of Arctic Ocean, utilization of Arctic Ocean is now achieving as a fiber optic cable across the Arctic Ocean done by the joint venture between Finland, United States, and Japan. And the Japanese interest to the utilization of the Arctic Ocean is remaining. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will get back into some of these details. Now I would like to hand over the floor to Mead. And Mead, you were introduced by the senator, but you can also get to introduce yourself a little bit. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mads, and it's wonderful to be here. You didn't introduce yourself either, but I'm just going to tell you, 8 nations came together, and it took us a couple of decades before we had an Arctic Economic Council, and I don't think we could have picked a better spokesman for the opportunities of the Arctic than our moderator today. And thank you. And President Grimson, thank you for bringing us back to Japan. And to our hosts at the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, I just want to say you've done a marvelous job. For those of you who have not thought about Japan and Arctic cooperation, in the early 1980s, former Governor Wally Hickel and I went to Hokkaido and visited the Northern Region Center. And the Northern Region Center had done a conference on Northern cooperation, and they came to Alaska. They'd done one in Japan, one in Alberta, and they came to Alaska and did one in 1990. And out of that came the Northern Forum, which materialized as all Northern governors. At the same time, the Finnish initiative for the Arctic Environmental Protection Strategy happened. And so Japan has been on the ground floor of Arctic cooperation. And one of the reasons why, if you take a look at this chart behind me, there's really 6 big things we do in the Arctic. And in my state, I doubt we'd be doing any of them if it hadn't been for seminal Japanese investment early on in our time as a state. But look at what we do in the Arctic, and this applies to the Nordic regions, it applies to North America, it applies to Russia, all of Eurasia. We help feed the world. We have 2 of the most productive fisheries on Earth, one in the Bering, one in the Barents. And we have had to work together as countries throughout to help make those fisheries sustainable. And as you heard with some of the questions yesterday, there's still more work to be done. We help fuel the world, and President Grimson, your energy alone is a huge Icelandic export of energy for what we do. But we just heard a presentation from Jagmek on the resources in Russia. I am head of an LNG company that is hoping to bring natural gas, as Senator Sullivan mentioned, to Asia. We pioneered LNG into Japan in 1969. We have tremendous things happening with geothermal, which we heard about yesterday, and Iceland's environmental minister spoke about. There is so much yet to be done, and I have no doubt that we will be continuing to fuel the world. And to those who say this, we're seeing an end of fossil fuels, I'm going to say this. There has to be an end of carbon being let loose into the atmosphere. But the amount of work being done on decarbonization, on flue gas recovery here and bringing molecules back to re-inject in the ground, on new catalytic technologies, they're all significant, and the Arctic is one of the best test beds in the world to make this happen. So we're going to do a lot with conventional and unconventional energy, and we already have. We help provision the world, and there was a panel here this morning on mining and critical minerals. And if you just think, the largest nickel mine in the world for our batteries is Norilsk in northeastern Russia. One of the largest lead zinc mines in the world is in Alaska at Red Dog. One of the largest iron ore mines in the world is on Baffin Island in Canada. The opportunities that we've heard for rare earth minerals in Greenland, in Canada, and Alaska are absolutely significant. And we will continue to be a provisioner to the world. We protect the world, and I'm not going to get too deep into security, but our natural forces protect the world too. We certainly sell postcards of the Aurora Borealis, but what's happening there is the magnetic poles of the Earth actually protect us from harmful solar radiation, and without those poles, there would be no life on Earth. We are a protector of the world by sending so much of albedo with reflection of solar radiation back into space. And of course, our defense relationship, which Senator Sullivan mentioned, is entirely significant. We connect the world. And we just heard about one of the world's experts on Arctic shipping, and we just heard some very interesting panels this morning on fiber connections coming along. The aviation connections are significant. Before COVID, before Ukraine, 10,000 people cross the Arctic Ocean every day with global aviation. And someday, I believe Arctic shipping will be as boring and as commonplace as global aviation if we can work it out to do it sustainably. And I'm proud that as a member of the Arctic Circle Board, President Grimson asked us to put together the first Mission Council on Shipping and Ports, and the US Congress took one of our recommendations and is creating a study group to see what we can do together to make shipping safe, secure, and reliable, and you'll hear more about that in the future. So we feed the world, fuel the world, provision the world, protect the world, connect the world, and don't let me stop without saying all of us inspire the world. It's not only our beauty, it's our tremendous cultures. If you go to Hokkaido, there's a Museum of Northern Peoples that explains how we've been related for centuries and how there's so much more to be done. I was joking with some security analysts, intelligence analysts, that we have a situation now where we went through a whole generation of not only interaction with Russia, but in Alaska, we had more people at our university from Russia than all the other universities in the United States combined. And I jokingly say half of them got married. And the point is that we've got a huge amount of human intelligence. We've got a huge amount, no matter how tough things get with China. I can't tell you how important it was for the last generation for us to have friendships and to know people that we grow up and keep in touch with. Because the Arctic is a place where we're going to come together again. It has to be. And the last thing I'll just say about inspiring the world is that we have a project in Alaska called the Alaska Innovation Hall of Fame. And we recognize some of the timeless inventions that Arctic residents have brought to the world, like the kayak, and other things that nobody collects a royalty for, but they were invented in our part of the world. And the other thing is that you can see many, many other inventions, intellectual property coming out of Iceland, coming out of Alaska, coming out of Canada, coming out of the other Nordic regions, even coming out of Russia, that we're very, very proud to see as exporters. So, Mads, I'm just going to turn around. When we talk about the Arctic economy, we have to be a place that attracts investment. Scott Minard should be standing here today. We lost him in December. He was a very strong member of the Arctic Circle Advisory Board. He was the one who wrote the protocol for investment in the Arctic. And we looked at the Arctic investment needs. He added them up to $1 trillion. We don't have enough money in our mattress cushions or under our pillow to meet those investment things. And so the one thing I will say, coming together as the Arctic, that we have to do is we have to be an attractive place to invest. And we can't be seen as an attractive place to invest unless we work together, and that's why what we're doing here today is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mead. And yesterday we heard from the ambassador, the Icelandic ambassador here in Japan, that the second most studied language in Iceland is Japanese. And I think that's fascinating. I think it's fascinating that in Iceland people are saying we have a special relationship with Japan. And to represent this special relationship with Japan, no pressure, we have the managing director from an Icelandic company, and she's also the chairman of the Icelandic-Japan Chamber of Commerce. So, Nireki, I would like to give you the floor for your opening remarks to reflect a little bit about this connection with Japan, with Iceland, with the Arctic. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm Shoko Nireki. I'm a chairman of the Chamber of Commerce of Iceland in Japan. Normally, the Icelandic person becomes this chairman, but Icelandic people also know we are a bit lack of number of people always. So now I'm a chairman, speak on behalf of the business in Japan related to between Iceland and Japan. And then, yes, you know well that the second most popular language to study in Iceland is now Japanese, which really amazed me. But it's a bit like a France, but people know animation, manga, and some food. Yeah, the Iceland and Japan share a bit similar landscape in terms of like volcano. Go to hot spring, Yeah, the landscape. When we have an earthquake, we always talk about between Iceland and Japan. Iceland is becoming apart, separated, and Japan is where the land hits. So either way, we are kind of opposite. As a chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, I just want to go a bit of a list of the business, what we see in Japan from Iceland. So one is fish. It's a big fish consumpting country here. One of the famous one is shishamo, the small fish. The Japanese people went to Iceland. Why do you throw away this fish? Because Icelandic people said, we don't eat it. We have more things to eat. So shishamo became one of the big business that most of the shishamo is actually imported from Iceland, where we eat in Japan. Then lamb meat, also wool, has been a big business. The 20% of the lamb meat is exported to Japan. And when the food is good, Japanese people like it. So when the Icelandic food is good, then Japan become a big partner. Another thing is that the geothermal energy, that Iceland is having a big kind of natural resource for geothermal, where Japan has a really kind of sophisticated machine, very efficient turnaround of the energy. So that Iceland has this natural resource, and then Japanese company has a machine where when we see the collaboration, where now we see all this Japanese big companies machine in Iceland for geothermal. And then outdoor tourism is the most popular outdoor tourism in the world is now counted as Iceland, #1. Where you have been to Iceland, that you understand that all this natural landscape are, well, not just amazing, but all the, like Hollywood movies, that they film Iceland as somewhere in space, not even on the earth. So it's very different look. So we also have this tourism company that working in Japan to attract Japanese people to go to Iceland. Then when you talk about subsea cable, you don't just throw the cable into the ocean. You need a guided rope to put this cable to the subsea, 100 meters. This rope is actually coming from Iceland. It's very unique, it's exclusive technology. The product is coming from long history of fishing. So the big contribution to make it successful project for this subsea cable. Then last but not the least is Osher, is an Icelandic pride company that Osher makes prosthetics. When you lose your arms and legs, you need a prosthetics. And sadly, it's required for Ukraine people that these days that we send the people to train the Ukraine people to make prostheses in Ukraine. Then we also ship the product to fit the patient. So it has that side of it, or people coming from disease and then they lose the legs. Then we provide prosthetics. So I'm actually doing this prosthetic business over 2 decades in Japan from Iceland. So where we talk about all this business from Iceland, you see there's something in common. It's always based on clean air, clean ocean, and clean water. It's really based on this like a business to be successful. So I see that there's a basic of the business, but also there's a bit of spice in it, like innovations. I think that's very Icelandic people are good at innovations. That's what I see. So that's something make us unique, and then exclusive technology to be provided to Japan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to unpack a little bit, especially what the professor was saying in the introduction, because you talked about the shipping and the shipping routes and so on. As we all know, no trade happens in a snow bottle. The Arctic is not like a snow globe that you just shake, you know? Like, we trade with each other, as we heard, Iceland, Japan, subsea cables will go to Alaska and so on. And shipping is what's gonna connect everything in the world, or is connecting. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more about the role of shipping with like the Arctic region, with Japan or Asia, and what's the importance for this? I mean, what is it that the Arctic has to offer that will be put on ships to Asia and vice versa? Professor.
Okay, thank you very much. So as I talked in my first, as I mentioned in my first talk, the interest to the Arctic shipping started in the 1980s, and this was the really first step in the world. So together with Norway and Russia, and the Japan is surrounded by ocean, and most of the goods are coming from water. So the shipping is the lifeline of Japan, and the Arctic is a new idea and a new opportunity or new possibility for us, and we can find the new something new cargoes or something new partner together with the Northern European area, and also the North America and Canada as well. So we are still trying to research about how the shipping can be more sustainable and safe and sustainable and safe, and also the in order to make some more economically feasible way or system of the shipping across the Arctic.
And what are the main challenges there? When you talk about making it safe, sustainable, and secure, and so on, what are the challenges in the Arctic?
Yes, thank you. So the Japanese research project is tackling with the ice forecast or modeling of the Arctic Ocean to understand the ice condition and the weather condition to give the precise or good information for the shipping companies or navigation, mostly the ship itself. And so the main challenge at this moment, main challenge is the scientific field to develop the so maybe monitoring system and forecasting system.
Perfect, thank you. And there's actually a great Alaskan company called Polarctic that works with sea ice forecasting, and it's two young women using machine learning, using artificial intelligence, and trying to help with the shipping. Mead, I just want, before I give you the word, you mentioned investments. You know, we always talk about investments, infrastructures, maybe people as well, demographics are some of the main obstacles. But I want to look at the solutions. You know, how do we attract more investments? How do we get Asian investments into, for example, Alaska, and what are the opportunities there? So like, maybe you could just expand a little bit more on that investment paradox.
Yeah, in the little bio in front of you mentions that I was with PT Capital. PT Capital came together when we were challenged by Scott Minard and David Rubenstein at an Arctic conference like this in 2011, 2012. It said, if you were to start a private equity firm, what would you go after? And we formed PT Capital, or Hugh Short formed it. I joined it in 2015. We raised enough money to deploy about $400 million worth of assets, became one of the largest investors in Iceland, and then brought Icelandic investors back to Alaska, a very large investor in Finland. And the point is we were one of the pioneers on circumpolar investment, and now there are others following us. The presentation that we heard this morning from Greenland was incredibly well done. And I just want to say that the opportunities for tourism growth there are significant, and we have Icelanders I know, Europeans I know, North Americans I know looking at that new investment frontier because of what has been done, especially through this organization, to raise familiarity. Sometimes you have that. And part of this is if you're here in Japan, you live here in Japan, you've spent your weekend working with this, you're now familiar with a part of the world that has good legal regimes, has rule of law, has investment opportunity, and I think that's part of what we've been trying to do throughout. We've done a lot to invest, to induce other investors to come in. You had a slide this morning in a presentation, Mads, about what we call in Alaska ice lining, where dozens of banks have said we won't invest in the Arctic. Now, if you ask me, that's an abrogation of proper due diligence. It's an abrogation of the due diligence that we expect people who manage our money around the world to do before they make a decision to invest or not invest. What they haven't looked at is what outside investment has done to help raise the standard of living for Arctic residents, many of whom I have friends. Dan Sullivan's mother-in-law grew up in a house with a dirt floor in the Arctic, okay? It has been oil and gas development that has raised the standard of living here. Now, don't tell us that we're not paying attention to the carbon issues. We're not only affected by them, but there have been very intensive talks I've been a part of this week. There was an energy conference here in Japan last week on taking flue gas, taking the CO2 out and putting it back in the ground in some of these countries in the Arctic. There is a huge new chemistry frontier in catalytics, and you'll have it. So don't let us not get credit. And I should also say that Alaska has been the top proving ground for wind diesel in the United States in moving some of these more expensive to begin with alternative energies into the market. So we're doing that. The only other thing I'll just say about investment, and I want to say this about shipping, is that sometimes we miss the economics. There's somebody who knows more about shipping to my left, but I'll just say 18,000 ships use the Suez Canal every year, give or take. The Russians did a study that said about 10% of those ships would save money if they used the Northern Sea route. The Russians charge about $500,000 for escort services for a big ship across the Northern Sea route. So 1,800 ships paying $500,000 is a $900 million a year potential Arctic service market that somebody should be serving. And we have to get together to serve it, or at least bury the I own this and you can't use it approach that has held up this before. And we have to do the ship noise studies, and we have to do that. In the United States, we're trying to do some investment in a liquefied natural gas project that, like Yamal, will bring gas directly from the North Slope of Alaska, the North Slope of Canada, into these markets. And it may not be just gas. We're also looking at, in our feasibility study, ammonia. There's some very interesting new hydrogen technologies as well. So I think it's going to be investment mechanisms, familiarity, and a couple of pioneering projects. And you know, I first learned really about the Yamal project at an Arctic Circle meeting. And the Russians have done a huge amount to take the perception of risk out of Arctic shipping and Arctic resource commodity trade.
Thank you, man. Nireki, you gave a brilliant introduction to what the opportunities are between Iceland and Japan. We have geothermal, we have fish, with all of this, and everything sounds so easy. But there must be some obstacles for us in the far north coming to, for example, Japan. Is different cultures and so on. What are some of the obstacles of doing business? We're not that many people in the north, maybe it's different culture, maybe it's distances and so on. And also, how can we overcome some of those challenges?
Yes, thank you. So, not just Japan, but of course you need a good local partner for your business intellectual, advisory partner. That especially our business is pharmaceutical, then you need a local knowledge or local legal kind of understanding to make it successful, but also do the right thing. And to see the obstacles that if each company only think about your company, you can never be successful in the industry. And when you are only thinking about in your country, a lot of Japanese people ask, is it made in Japan? I don't sell anything made in Japan, but I'm like, why? Why you cannot take this made in somewhere else but not in Japan? Where if you only are stuck in your country, that also a bit become obstacle to see the world where more innovative products are just out there across the ocean. So not just your company, not just your country, but opening up the world to be fair and also to see more, innovative product. Maybe somebody else thought about it 10 years ago, where I think that's generous kind of mindset is also important. And then to do so, the intellectual property protection is also become very important. So like as a global standard, that we are also comfortable to open up the technology or the product utilization. I think that would be a better world that to get over the obstacles.
Thank you very much. And we have 4 minutes left here. If there's one question from the room, we can take that. Or else I have a final question for the panelists. There's one question there. Yes, please. And please introduce yourself as well.
Yes, hello. My name is Viktor Jaakkola. I'm from Helsinki, Finland. I study environmental and resource economics. My question is for Mead. I'm wondering about the carbon capture and storage technology. I have heard that fossil fuel companies in the US have lobbied for prohibition of the Environmental Protection Agency from monitoring leaks from these carbon capture and storage efforts where you pump carbon dioxide into oil and gas wells. Are you aware of this, and how do you make sure that there aren't leaks like this? Thank you.
And please, a short answer.
Very short answer. Alaska right now is developing its own standards, and the first question we're asking is how do we make sure that if we take your money, you get a carbon credit to put it in the ground, that it's not going to leak. And we believe with conventional wells, as deep as we would go, we would do that. I do want to say one other thing. There's a worldwide jump ball on carbon capture and storage. Carbon is actually a valuable resource. If it's carbon black, it's your tires. If it's graphite, it's your batteries. And I'm going to make the rash prediction here that while we're doing a huge amount to put CO2 back in the ground in different places, we're going to probably want to instead capture that carbon as a solid. And there are some new technologies coming along, which is why I talked about the chemistry. So you're right. If it's going into the ground, make sure it works. But that may not be the only technology that solves this problem.
Oh, perfect. And if you're coming to Arctic Circle Assembly in October, you should also visit Carbfix, which is an Icelandic company capturing CO2 from Europe, shipping it up to Iceland and shooting it inside the rocks. And after 2 years, it gets solidified in the rocks. It's a very interesting company, and it shows how you can do carbon capture and storage in other ways than shooting it into oil wells. We are running out of time. I just want to summarize. I think what I've heard there's opportunities within shipping, within energy, within food as well, food sector and so on, but it's all based on partnerships, it's all based on connections, on trading. And as I always say, that in the Arctic region, we have something quite unique in the business environment, and that is you do business at the speed of trust. And the speed of trust is the fastest way to do business. And that also comes when we heard about Japan and about partners and local partners. So let's continue talking with each other, building up the trust, and I'm sure we can do more business between Asia and the Arctic. Thank you very much to the panelists. Please give them a round of applause.